my books. It's got, there you go. So right there, it's got digital downloads of, and we'll mail these to you as well. But the Mile High Maverick book and the Everything I Wish I Knew When I Was 22 book, both of them work just fine on iPad or a Kindle or any kind of reader, or if you're a glutton for punishment, you can print them out. And then, Bob, if you scroll down to the next frame there, it also has about what is that, an hour and a half video that was actually recorded live in Chicago, downtown. I think we were at the downtown Marriott, if there is such a thing. So it was actually recorded live in Chicago, and you'll hear me talking about Fred Degerberg and a few other people in that. This video is, I think it's really useful for you. Anybody who's watched it already, let us know, and you can give us feedback. But it's kind of the 5 or 6 things that school owners do to sabotage themselves rather than do productively. And so it'd be really useful before, sometime between today's seminar and when you guys and Master Smith talk, is to go through this. I think it'll give you a really good foundation. It's going to give you, a lot more substance directly from me there. And then, Bob, if you scroll down a little bit, there's some other information. Yeah, skip that one. They've got that already. But there's just some other information here of some background on who we are and one thing or another if you don't know the bios and so forth. But mostly you have the 2 books, and we'll mail you physical copies if you prefer physical copies. And there's also the video. There's about a 90-minute video. And then, Bob, can you shift over to the Martial Arts Wealth /Mastermind page? There you go. And then on this one, again, there's 2 live seminar videos. Actually, I think this one was from Washington, D.C., not Chicago, but it was on the same little tour we did. So there's that video. And, Bob, if you don't mind scrolling a little bit, this is martialartswealth.com /mastermind, MASTERMIND. And, again, this would be useful to go through at least before that the We Talk. The first video with me looks like it's about 40 minutes. Then this is Lee Miltier, and she works with us as well. She is one of the top motivational speakers, success coaches. She's written a bunch of books, including Success is an Inside Job. But she's talking about the necessary steps to really get any business, including a martial arts school. This was recorded live at one of our live events with Lee. To really operate. And then just realize that it scrolls down. So I just gave you 4 hours worth of video material, more or less. But then scroll down and it gives you a little bit more structure on what we do with our members. And the way to think about it, really, maybe you can go just a little bit more down, Bob. I don't think anybody can really see the page on this screen, but the main thing to think about is, leave it right there. So go back up a little bit to that heading, specifically how do we work together. Really take a look at this section. And by the way, the pictures there, that's from one of our live events. That's myself with former New York City Police Commissioner Bernard Carrick. We had him talking about leadership and staff development. He had I think it's 35,000 uniformed police officers, 45,000 employees, the NYPD. If it was a standing army, it'd be like the 4th or 5th largest standing army in the world. But was under his control. He was the commissioner. Before that, he turned around. His bigger claim to fame was he turned around the New York City jail system. That was a disaster. And again, today under Bill de Blasio, it was a disaster so much that they're talking about shutting it down altogether. And it was running like a top when Bernie Carrick was running it. But the thing that we have done with this is I find that most school owners understand how they learned and mastered martial arts, and they understand and replicate that process for their students. But then when it comes to really running their school and running their business, they forget all about that for some reason. So for some reason, the same level of training, dedication, process, and methodology, that doesn't get replicated with running their school. And what I think we all know about what it takes to master martial arts, if you're going to develop a student from white belt to black belt, is they need to come to class with a group of peers that are all on the same journey. They need to have some examples of students who are doing much better than they are that they can emulate and to catch up with. They need to have a concerned and knowledgeable teacher and coach who's looking over their shoulder and guiding the path. And then they need to have an organized and focused curriculum. And what we have done with our martial arts wealth program is exactly create that process where we get really successful school owners together every week, sometimes a couple times a week. And we have a beginner class, level 1, so first year, level 2, 2-year, a level 3 for the big multi-million-dollar schools and staff development. But we have targeted classes by progress. We have the complete system A to Z. It doesn't matter whether it's a MMA school, Tang Soo Do school, Goju school. We're not talking about the physical curriculum, but all the other things to create a flow of new students, a solid enrollment process, a solid renewal process, and a solid retention process. So when you look through this information, is the thing to consider here is, and again, not too charitably, I have called the explosion of consultants in our industry the bozo explosion. But it really is a valid way to think about it. It's not just us. Almost every business niche with YouTube and social media, people are coming out of the woodwork pretending to be experts. But what happens is there's really more bad advice than there is good advice out there. And so what we have really anchored in on is you'll see the schools that we work with really are the top 1% and the top 5% of the industry. Usually people are in the top 5% when they come to work with us, although there are some exceptions to that. What is typical are examples that, Master Smith will give you, and you'll see here on this page. But really what is typical is a school doing $40,000 a month. A year later, they're doing $80,000 a month with minimal increases in their expenses. School doing $25,000 a month. 2 years later, they're doing $80,000 a month. So what is really typical is we get under the hood, really look at the drivers, but the benchmarks for everybody to really anchor in. Number one is losing 1 or 2% of your student base every month. Lower is better, but if you're in the 4, 5, 7, 10% range, that's a problem. And certainly if you're in the mass training range of who cares, that's not only a problem, but it's unethical and should be illegal. What we want to do is develop an awful lot of black belts that are really high quality. The second benchmark is the average student value. And we think of that student value in two ways, what the lifetime value is and what the monthly value is. And from a monthly value perspective and it's not just about raising the price. We'll talk a little bit about price in the seminar today. But what we know is the number one objections that school owners always tell us is, you don't know my area, my city, my people. We could never charge that. I'm already more than anybody else in my area. I'm already at the middle of everybody. You got to get rid of all of that because that's just an excuse. Because if you're doing your marketing right, less than 10%, probably less than 5% of your students ever pay attention to what anybody else is doing. And frankly, we're in an industry and you're in an area, frankly, where there aren't a lot of high quality schools. There's a lot of people who may be talented martial artists, talented athletes, but they're not particularly good at running their school. I'm sure you've seen that over and over and over again. So you've got to get that comparison out of your mind. So a second benchmark is we want to get that average revenue per student over 200, closer to 300 would be even better. So the third benchmark is we want to get where the ratios of new people coming in and those who convert to committing to black belt, we want committing to black belt to be at least 80% of the new people who come in. And we want to track through the intro enrollment process where 60, 70, 75% of the people who come into your school choose to enroll, but they choose to enroll on a strong structure that makes sense. Is that making sense?
Yes.
But what we'll do is we'll talk about this, and if it's a good fit, that's great. And by the way, you guys are always welcome to talk to. A couple of you got there through Jan, and Bob, we got to send her cookies or something to appreciate her her pointing you at us. But you're welcome to talk to any of the members that we have. Get the full behind the scenes. You have the opportunity there of Tim being there and getting a little ahead of our training cycle. But he's happy to answer any questions, I'm sure. And if I know Tim, he'll be brutally honest about any and everything. We're not coaching any of these guys or anything else. But talk to everybody, and what you'll find is the stories that we're telling you about the number of people coming into the school and the conversations we're having about student quality and student retention are absolutely rock solid. The other thing you'll find is, as long as you get your mindset in the correct position, you really want to do it, doubling the gross with minimal increase in the expenses is simple. Somebody I may have mentioned earlier, Colby Winkler, we were having a meeting down in Florida, and it was in a beautiful room overlooking Clearwater Beach. But I asked everybody, I said, we don't really have an elevator pitch. Chet Holmes used to call it a stadium pitch. You know, what's the short, easy description of what we do? And everybody kind of looked at each other. Nobody really said anything. And then Colby raised his hand and said, well, and Master Smith, he's also a Tang Soo Do stylist, correct?
He's Taekwondo.
He's a Taekwondo. Okay, I'm sorry. He's a Korean stylist. I was close.
Korean style.
There you go. But he raised his hand and said, well, when I started working with you guys, I was doing grossing $30,000 a month. Now I'm netting over $30,000 a month. So maybe you turn the gross into the net. And it really is a useful way to think about it. Oftentimes when you're running a school doing $30,000, $35,000 a month, there's a lot of expenses going out, or you're killing yourself. Right? The business owns you. It's usually either one or the other. And we can turn a $30,000 grossing school or $35,000 grossing school into one that's netting $35,000, but also has staff so that the business doesn't own you. So that's just something to anchor in and think in terms of an easy way to kind of categorize what it is we do. Mr. Dunn, anything to add to that before we let Master Smith get back to really being live with everyone?
I don't, sir. I think you've kind of covered it all. I'm glad to see everybody made it there safe.
Yeah, I will warn everybody, between today and all of the stuff that we're giving you online and the stuff that's going to show up in your mailbox, we're going to overwhelm you with content. And the reaction that Brett had of, oh my God, it's amazing I'm as successful as I've had given how little of this stuff that I've been doing, is a perfect reaction. And what will happen, though, is myself, Mr. Dunn, Master Smith, will hone that in for you to an actionable list of 3 or 4 things. So if you come out of the session today with 50 things that you think you need to do, that's fine. Sleep on it. But when we talk, we're going to come up with, here's the 3 things that are going to really make a difference, because we're going to focus on what's going to immediately get the net profit up and get the operation operating a little bit more smoothly, and put all those nice to do but not necessary to do things further down the list.
Yes, sir. And maybe one other thing too. So everybody knows I'm going to add you to the schedule for your phone call next week, but also just a heads up, you're going to get a book from us and a number of other free gifts that are going to be emailed out to you. So keep an eye out for your email for the different little tools that we're going to be sending out between now and then. And we will call next week.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Well, we'll get out of your hair, Master Smith. I'm sure you have it well in hand from here.
If you'll quit sharing the screen for a second, Bob.
Yes, sir.